Hello and welcome to PMQs with Graham Hughes. We're now moving to Prime Minister's questions. So if you'd like to join us there, you can. Let's get on with the show.
Dr. Danny Chambers.
Dr. Danny Chambers.
Number one, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, he wants a number one. Excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Alex Salmond was a monumental figure in Scottish and UK
to
politics.
Alex Salmond.
He leaves a lasting legacy, and I know that the deepest condolences of the whole House are with Moira, his family, and his loved ones. Mr. Speaker, this week we also remember our colleague and friend, Sir David Amess, whose kindness and commitment to public service continues to inspire us all, and I know how deeply this was felt on the benches opposite, and I'm so glad that his plaque is here in the House with us. I also want to acknowledge the extraordinary life of Holocaust survivor Lily Ebbert, whose message of hope showed such courage. May her memory be a blessing. Mr. Speaker, we also extend our sympathies to the family of General Sir Mike Jackson. He was an inspirational leader of the British Army and served with distinction. Mr. Speaker, I know the whole House will join me in wishing the best of luck to the new England manager, Thomas Tuchel. I won't hold his old job against him, but I wish him well in the new one. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others in addition to my duties in this House. I shall have further such meetings later today.
Dr. Danny Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In last week's maternity services debate, we heard of the devastating impact of the removal of consultant-led maternity services from a hospital. Now, under the previous government's unfunded new hospital programme, there were proposals to remove consultant-led maternity services from our hospital in Winchester. Could the Prime Minister reassure me and my constituents that under the new government that consultant-led maternity services and A&E services will remain in Winchester, and will he commit to funding properly the backlog of maintenance that has developed in our hospital in Winchester?
Well, I thank him for raising this very important issue and for championing the voices of women in his constituency. We are committed to ensuring that all women and babies receive safe, compassionate and personalised care through pregnancy, birth and critical following months. Reconfiguration of the services, as he knows, is a matter for the integrated care boards, important as it allows decisions to be made locally and tailored to local interests. But all changes should be based on evidence, clinically led, and involve engagement with patients to ensure they'll deliver better outcomes.
Sorry to hear that, Sarah,
issue.
about COVID.
Alison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whitby Interactive has provided inclusive play schemes and holiday activities for children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities for 26 years. It has been a lifeline for families continually failed by Conservative governments. But Interactive is set to close due to a funding shortfall. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that action to tackle the crisis in SEND provision is urgently needed, and that charities like Interactive deserve our support more than ever?
Yes, I do, and I know this will be a concerning time for families who rely on the brilliant work of Whitby Interactive. Children with special educational needs and disabilities have been failed for too long, and this comes up repeatedly in this House, with parents struggling to get their children the support that they need and that they deserve. We must raise the standards for every child so they can succeed in education. We will fix the foundations, Mr. Speaker, and ensure every child can achieve their potential.
Leader of the Opposition, Rishi Sunak.
Oh, here we go. Right, let's get going.
Can I join with the Prime Minister's words of tribute to Alex Salmond and the Holocaust survivor Lily Ebbert, and thank him for his kind words about Sir David Amess. We remember him fondly, and we will be thinking of all their families at this moment. Mr. Speaker, this week China has carried out unwarranted, aggressive and intimidatory military exercises in the Taiwan Strait.
Wasn't expecting
Our
a
allies
question
are
about
rightly
China.
concerned after worrying reports that the government may have intervened to stop a visit to the UK by the former Taiwanese president. can the Prime Minister confirm that the Foreign
The Prime
Secretary
Minister.
will use his meetings in Beijing this week to condemn China's dangerous escalatory acts in the Strait?
Okay, I find myself agreeing a bit
Thank
there.
you for his question. The continued military activity in the Strait is not conducive to peace
No,
and stability.
it's really, really
the
not.
stability of the Taiwan Straits is in all of our interests.
Hi, Lee.
On the wider
Afternoon.
point that he raises, we will cooperate where we can as permanent members of the UN Security
had
Council. Issues like
Lockyo,
net zero,
the kids had
health and trade.
COVID for
Compete
5
where we
weeks.
have different
God,
interests.
sorry.
But challenge, the point he makes is absolutely right where it's needed to protect national security, human rights and our values, and we will put that challenge in.
Sunak.
Well, given what the Prime Minister said, and I agree, of course, we must engage, and we should use that engagement for our national interests. I hope that the Foreign Secretary will unequivocally condemn this military escalation and stand up for democracy in Taiwan. Now, the
It is
whole
satisfying,
House
isn't it, Gallifrey?
will be concerned about the fate of the democracy campaigner Jimmy Lai. He is a British citizen who has been wrongly imprisoned in Hong Kong for 4 years. The previous government pressured China for his release. Does the Prime Minister agree that this is a politically motivated prosecution and that it is a breach of China's legal obligations to Hong Kong
Yes.
under the Sino-British Declaration?
Yes, it is. So
Yes,
it's going to be
and
oh,
this
yes,
case, as
just
he
straight
will
out, yes.
understand,
Did
is
you hear
a
that?
priority for the government.
Did you hear that?
We do call
The
on
MP
the Hong Kong
the Prime Minister
authorities
just stood up
to
and went,
release
yes.
immediately our British national, and the Foreign Secretary
My
raised
God.
this case in his first
This is-
meeting
this
with
is a brave new
China's
world.
Foreign Minister, and we will
I
continue
actually get stuff
to do
done.
so.
Rishi Sunak.
I
get some
thank the Prime Minister for that
inflation
answer.
down,
Now, China, as
investments
he knows, has
in.
become a decisive enabler of Russia's war against Ukraine, supplying the vast majority now of Russia's imported military microelectronics and components, worsening the suffering of the Ukrainian
Question
people.
and answer, gasp.
So can the
yeah.
Prime Minister confirm that he is prepared to sanction any Chinese business or individual involved in aiding Russia's invasion of Ukraine,
What about
including
emphasis?
secondary sanctions on
What about
financial
emphasis?
institutions?
What about emphasis?
Yes, and we've
say
called for
yes,
that
and
in the
also
past. We continue
Indian
to do so, and I hope this is an issue where we can have
that are
unity
propping
across
up.
the House.
Rishi
Russia.
Sunak.
Yes, I can assure the Prime Minister of his support. It is something that we began. The United States recently have expanded their sanctions, and I hope that the new government will continue to look at doing the
still
same.
shocked that
now,
Keir
the last
Starmer
government
stood up and
also
went, yes.
established a new system of registration and monitoring to protect the UK
Wow.
from interference from foreign states, including China, Russia, and Iran. Called the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, it was described as essential by MI5 in the fight to help keep Britain safe. But since the Prime Minister took office, he has halted its implementation. Why?
That isn't correct.
Rishi Sunak.
Wow. Wow. That was succinct.
Mr. Speaker, that is very clearly what the government has said. And only last week he said at the dispatch box that he would give the security forces the powers they need. And if he is going to fulfil that promise, I would urge him to get up to speed on this issue and therefore implement the scheme. Furthermore, Parliament's Intelligence and
Mic
Security
drop, yeah.
Committee have warned that British universities are increasingly a
That
rich
is
feeding
not
ground
true. Sits
for
down
China
again.
to exert
Love it.
political influence over us. That's why we passed the Freedom of Speech Act.
Yeah,
with
appreciate
new
it while you can.
powers.
Badenoch or
With
Genrix
new
coming soon.
powers to help defend universities from this threat, but the new Education Secretary has since blocked it.
Defend
So can the Prime
universities.
Minister tell us how
about
without
defending our
this
political
tool,
system
the
from the
government
threat?
will prevent Chinese influence over our universities?
What about Russian influence over our
I
democracy?
really don't think party political points on security and intelligence. Honestly, throughout the last Parliament,
like a
we
naughty school
stood with the
child.
government on all questions of security and intelligence because it was important to the outside world that we did so. I worked with the security and intelligence services for 5 years prosecuting cases. I know firsthand the work that they do as a lawyer. I've known firsthand the work they do as the Prime Minister. We support them in everything that we do, and he knows that.
Mr. Speaker, whether it's the FIRST scheme or the Freedom of Speech Act, these were new tools, new sets of powers that the previous government
of Speech
passed
Act.
in order to give, whether it's our universities or security services the powers they need to tackle a growing threat. And we will, of course, continue to support the government in protecting our national security, but do believe on this side of the House that those tools are needed and are concerned by reports that the new government has paused their implementation or indeed scrapped them. But finally, Mr. Speaker, the Chinese government has sanctioned multiple members of our parliament for championing human rights. As a result, they have faced intimidation, abuse and surveillance. And Mr. Speaker, I commend you for your defence of the right of every member of this House to speak out on crucial issues without fear of retaliation from foreign states. Now, I know the Prime Minister will agree with that.
To be horrible without fear of libel or slander
will
rules.
The Foreign Secretary in his meetings not just raise the issue, but tell the Chinese government to lift those sanctions on our colleagues?
Yes, and we speak with one voice. He speaks about the record of the last government. That record was 14 years of failure. 6 years, 6 years austerity.
Can't argue with that.
3 years of Brexit logjam. Then Johnson Trust and the leader of the opposition, utter failure. And this government was elected to do things differently, to make fairer choices, but most importantly, to give Britain its future back. So we will fix the foundations. We'll do it with a long-term plan to grow our economy, protect working people, and rebuild our country.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 years ago, Thurrock Council was led into effective bankruptcy by the then Conservative administration, in no small part due to an investment of hundreds of millions of pounds into a solar farm scheme run by a con man. Given the Prime Minister's commitment to integrity in public life, will he support mine and my constituents' calls for a public inquiry so that those responsible can finally be held to account?
Party championing human rights,
Thank you for a
bit rich.
question, because years of underfunding have left councils facing huge budget pressures. They yawn. They don't know the impact it has on working people
they don't care.
up and down the country.
They
rely
don't care.
on public services, and what's happened in Thurrock is shocking. We are committed to resetting the relationship and helping those under intervention to recover and to reform. 14 years is a long time to destroy local services, and it's clear it'll take time to fix them. We will get councils back on their feet by providing multi-year funding settlements. But ultimately, we have to grow our economy, and I'm surprised the Prime Minister didn't welcome the £63 billion of investment that we were able to announce on Monday.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I echo the tributes to the Prime Minister, to Alex Salmond, to Sir David Amess and to Lily Ebbott? And can I welcome the news that ministers are going to review the carers allowance repayment scandal after campaigns by carers organisations, the Guardian newspaper,
another Tory
and the
scandal,
Democrats, culminating in our motion on the order
how many
paper
Tory scandals
today.
were there?
But will he agree
dozens,
with me that the evidence needed
hundreds.
for the review is already long established and many of the decisions self-evident? So will he and his colleagues vote for our motion today so we can write off the overpayments?
Oh, did he call this?
We can end
Did he call
the crazy
Sunak the
cliff
Prime
edge
Minister
to the
again? I missed that.
earnings limit
Sorry.
now and have a fuller review for the support that carers deserve.
I thank him for raising this. This is obviously a really important issue affecting a number of people, and that's why we've launched an independent review into the carers allowance overpayments to look at the circumstances of the overpayments, to see what went wrong and therefore what can be done to put it right, because carers must get the support that they deserve. So I'm grateful for him for raising it. I'm glad that we've been able to take this action today
Too many Tory
to
scandals
go forward
for
on a
one
really
chat.
important issue.
Too many Tory scandals for one lifetime.
Can I thank the Prime Minister for that answer and ask him that ministers in the review will listen to the voices of carers throughout. Can I turn to the Middle East now? Israeli Finance Minister Smotrich had said that starving 2 million people in Gaza might be justified and moral. National Security Minister Ben-Gvir called settlers who killed a 19-year-old on the West Bank heroes. After my visit to Israel and Palestine last February, having witnessed the damage that these extremist ministers in the Netanyahu government are doing, I called on the last government to sanction them. The last government refused, but we now learn that the former Foreign Secretary was considering this. So will the Prime Minister now sanction Ministers Ben-Gvir and Smotrich?
Yes. Stand up and say yes.
We are looking at that because they're obviously abhorrent comments, as he rightly says, along with other really concerning activity in the West Bank, but also across the region. The humanitarian situation in Gaza is dire. The death toll has surpassed 42,000, and access to basic services is becoming much harder. And Israel must take all possible steps to avoid civilian casualties, to allow aid into Gaza in much greater volume, and provide the UN and humanitarian partners the ability to operate effectively. Mr. Speaker, along with France, the UK will convene an urgent meeting of the UN Security Council to address this.
Lyndon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been an honour to meet my constituent, Tom Morton, a young person in care who sat in the public gallery today and cares so deeply about politics and communities. Young people in care are at a disproportionate risk of criminal and cynical exploitation by drug barons through county lines. Will the Prime Minister tell Tom and the House what steps the government will take to prevent vulnerable children in care becoming involved in county line operations?
Well, can I welcome Tom to this
Could
House?
legalise
It's encouraging
drugs.
to see young people
I think they'll win
engaging
that
in
the sales,
democracy.
wouldn't
County lines is a real problem, and all of us will have experienced the effect and impact of that in our constituencies. And our County Lines programme focuses on preventing young people being exploited and lured into criminal gangs, which is far too common, and committed to introduce a new offence of child criminal exploitation, long overdue. We will also create a network of young future hubs, staffed with professional youth workers, mental health support workers and career advisors, to provide focused support for young people, helping them to fulfil their ambitions and preventing them being drawn into crime.
Savile Roberts.
Iawn, Lefaredd, and Plaid Cymru too would like to pay tribute to Alex Salmond and Sir David Amess. Mr. Speaker, 1 in 5 people in Wales is on an NHS waiting list. The Secretary of State for Wales says that a new cross-border NHS plan would bring down Welsh surgery waiting lists. But the First Minister of Wales, Labour, contradicts her. She denies it has anything to do with bringing down waiting lists. Are they making it up as they go along?
The difference is this: we now have a Westminster government that wants to work with the Welsh government to deliver for the people of Wales. For 14 long years, the Welsh government was in a position where the then government was in conflict with them. So now we will work together, collaborate, and ensure that together we deliver across Wales.
Chris MacDonald.
Deliver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, join me in praising our Labour Police and Crime Commissioner for Cleveland, Matt Storey, who's working with me to tackle knife crime, drug crime and antisocial behaviour in Stockton North, and assure my constituents that under this Labour government we'll see more police officers in Stockton and Billingham.
Well, I welcome his work with the new Labour Police and Crime Commissioner. And it's sad to say that in Cleveland, full-time equivalent police officers fell by over 12% under the last government. When you fail on the economy and growth, those are the types of things that happen across the country. As part of our neighbourhood policing guarantee, we'll put 13,000 more neighbourhood police and PCSOs back on our streets and ensure every community has a named local officer. Through our Safer Streets mission, we will tackle illegal drugs, half-knife crime and crack down on antisocial behaviour and go after the gangs that lure young people into violence.
And Hawke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As evidenced by some earlier questions, issues surrounding SEND, local government finance and adult social care are issues which affect all of our constituents. And let's be honest, Mr. Speaker, for too long, both parties have ducked and dodged making difficult but necessary decisions. In order,
Really? So your side, Hal. Yeah?
In order
your side then.
In order to give certainty to our constituents,
This nasty little
and
gam-gam.
confidence to
I'll give
those
you a
who
gammon.
provide those vital services,
Have a gammon.
does the Prime Minister
on me.
share my assessment that there is considerable merit in formal cross-party working on these issues, where we can share taking those difficult decisions in order to improve outcomes
So
for our
waffling
constituents?
about delivering outcomes, delivering, moving
well,
forward.
I'm grateful to him for raising this question about SEND, because it is a really important issue, and I think this is the fourth time in two Prime Minister's questions where it's been raised on both sides of the House.
Yes.
I quibble
Grossly
with his
underfunded
suggestion it's
by
both
the last
parties
Tory
since his party was in power for
administration.
14 years.
Yeah, exactly.
But the spirit in which he puts this forward, that this should be cross-party, is something that we should take up, because it's such an important issue. It affects so many children and parents, and therefore, notwithstanding the quibble, I'm very happy to work across
Yeah,
the-
Lucas, look, that's taken
across the House
ages
on an issue as
till our
important
first
as
Tory
this.
question over the
Katrina
Leader of the
Murray.
Opposition. Yeah, I like that as well.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Fairways Networking Group, a group of small businesses in my constituency of Cumbernauld and Kirkintilloch, all operate on
easy for
small,
you to
on
say.
tight margins. Can my right honourable friend help me reassure this group that not only do they have nothing to fear from the Employment Rights Bill, but they have plenty to gain as exemplar employers?
Yes, the Employment Rights Bill is pro-worker and pro-growth, and proudly so. And I don't believe you can build a strong economy by having people in insecure work. The party opposite, they go against every protection for workers. They're against the minimum wage, they're against these new protections. But the vast majority of businesses, large and small, already know that investing in your human capital, treating people properly at work, is what produces growth. So here's the big political divide.
And
They
productivity
always oppose
increases
workers' rights.
productivity.
We will always
Yeah,
champion them.
happy workers work harder. It makes moral sense and it makes economic
I
sense.
associate the Green Party with his tributes to Alex Salmond and Sir David Amess. 99.7% of new patients in the east of England are unable to find an NHS dentist, the worst affected area in the country. My constituents in Waveney Valley want urgent action. So when will the government begin the critical negotiations on dental contract reform so no one in the 21st century has to pull out their own teeth? And will it be by the end of this year?
Well, he
Yes,
raises a really
ASAP.
important issue, because dentistry
does.
was left in a shocking state by the last government.
Yes, they were.
I was shocked to hear that for children's hospitals, the commonest cause for admission for 6 to 10-year-olds in our children's hospitals in this country is to have teeth taken out because of the failure of the last government. That is shocking on any analysis. We will put
Absolutely
that right.
appalling.
We will take the necessary steps, and we'll work across the House to do this as quickly as possible.
Dan Smith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Last night in this House, we took the first steps in abolishing the hereditary principle of privilege. I was hosting the Let's End Poverty Coalition at a meeting upstairs where we heard that often for many who experience poverty, that feels hereditary too. So will the Prime Minister meet with me and those with lived experience of poverty to find ways in which we can hear from those with that lived experience to break that cycle of poverty?
Yes.
She makes a good point. The party opposite, they want to get rid of maternity pay, but keep hereditary peers.
Yeah.
It's the
Good
same
point.
old Tories.
Good point.
You know, the letters, this is an important issue that she's raised. The letters are honest, powerful and important. And I think they hold up a mirror to our country. We will deliver a budget that drives economic growth, improves the lives of working people,
Did he say the D word?
fixes our public services and rebuilds our country with a decade of national renewal.
I'm honestly sick of hearing that word. It should be banned. Just
My
put money in a swear jar
constituent Jeanette
every time they say
Crawford
it.
suffers from ME and chronic pain. The cold, damp conditions of a Welsh winter are going to mean a lot more muscle soreness and fatigue for her. She's lost her winter fuel payments due to having a very small savings pot. With 86% of pensioners in poverty or just above that line to miss out in Wales, will the Prime Minister establish a social energy tariff to help people like Jeanette?
The letters.
On this issue of winter fuel payments, we have inherited a £22 billion black card. They should be apologising, not groaning, for leaving the country in such a state.
I don't.
We are committed
have that
to the
animation
triple
on my
lock.
laptop,
The point about
sorry.
pensions is really important, and that means that the triple lock means that the pension will
Got an extra
increase
living.
again
Got an extra liver.
£460 next year,
Probably
which
not.
means that
The
pensioners
government
under
is
Labour will be
delivering.
better off because
I like
we're going to
that.
stabilise the economy after that lot lost control of it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Britain, the biggest killer of men under 50 is suicide. We have some of the worst paternity leaves in Europe.
Mental health.
And boys are 50% less likely than girls to pursue higher education. I know that my right honourable friend takes this very seriously, and his commitment on reducing suicide rates is very welcome. Can the Prime Minister update the House on this work, and does he agree with me that it is vital that we tackle these issues head-on because of the increasing alienation and mental health issues amongst young men?
I thank him for raising this vital issue. The statistics on male suicide are truly shocking. I went to an event just a few years ago here in this place where everyone in attendance was asked if they had lost someone to suicide, and I then reflected on my own experience, which was profound. As it was, I could see for everybody across the room, and will be across this House. So reducing deaths from suicide is a vital part of our health mission. We're recruiting an additional 8,500 mental health workers, specially trained to support people at risk of suicide, to provide faster treatment and ease pressure on our services.
Lizzie Chance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Group Captain Lizzie Nichol had an exemplary career with the RAF until she was forced to resign for refusing to implement illegal recruitment
me 22
orders.
billion
Despite
black
inquiry
hole
after inquiry
animation
vindicating
for next
Lizzie,
time.
on every
I need
count,
it.
the RAF and MOD have failed to offer her fair compensation, and those responsible have walked away. Shamefully, during the Purdah election period, in what I believe was an attempt to subvert ministerial oversight, she was offered a derisory £2,000 by officials. I have documents proving beyond doubt that the former Chief of the Air Staff lied to the then Defence Secretary about her case. The Prime Minister says he believes in righting wrongs, so will he meet with Lizzie and help ensure that those responsible do not just walk away and that Lizzie gets the justice that she so very much deserves?
I thank her for raising what is obviously a very important case, and she's right to do so. I'm not across the individual details of it, but it obviously does need to be looked into, so we will commit to look into it, and I will make sure that she gets a meeting with the relevant minister to lay out such details as she has and to get some answers as to our inquiries.
Jake Richards.
Mr. Speaker, children's social care in this country is now in crisis. Vulnerable children are regularly placed hundreds of miles from home, often in unregulated and unsafe accommodation.
Yes.
Meanwhile, private companies are making record profits on the backs of struggling and desperate local authorities. Frankly, this is an issue, a national scandal that doesn't get enough attention.
Tories privatising,
Today, Mr. Speaker,
suffering.
I'll be presenting my private member's bill, which will offer modest reform in this area. But will the Prime Minister reassure me and thousands of families across the country that it is a priority of his government to fix the social care crisis and our family courts?
Well, I thank him for raising this issue and being a champion on it. He is absolutely right about the appalling inheritance. 1 in 4 children in absolute poverty. That's a terrible inheritance. Jesus. And too many vulnerable children in unregulated accommodation. Through our Children's Wellbeing Bill, we will put children and their well-being at the heart of education and social care systems. We'll also provide a home for all young care leavers to ensure that they're not homeless and remove the barriers to opportunity so every child can thrive in safe and loving homes.
Mr. Speaker, during the election campaign, the now Prime Minister made a hell of a lot of promises, some of which I'm sure he will remember. Of particular importance to my constituents in Andover, North West Hampshire, was a promise made on the 18th of June during a campaign visit to Basingstoke, when he made an unequivocal, unconditional commitment to rebuild our local hospital. Mr. Speaker, is this a promise on which we can rely?
Mr. Speaker, firstly, I'm grateful to him for raising this because it's obviously of huge importance to his constituents and his right to do so. We are reviewing, as he knows, the programme, The programme that the last government put in place for 40 new hospitals had a number of flaws. They weren't all hospitals, they weren't new, and they weren't funded, so we're reviewing it. But what I will... No, but he's right to raise this, and I will make sure that he has a meeting with the relevant minister to discuss the particular development in his constituency. It will matter to his constituents who are listening to this, and it's important they know where the failure lay.
Mr. Speaker,
Nicely done.
I welcome the government's historic investment in carbon capture and storage technology for Teesside and Merseyside. This week I've been at the sector's conference, and the feeling there is that this is a government delivering after years of delay.
Oh, did he say the magic
Will
word?
The Prime Minister
He did, didn't he?
recognise the unique potential that Teesside has for jobs, prosperity and economic growth into the future?
Yes, and Mr. Speaker, you will have observed that on Monday we had a very successful investment summit, £63 billion coming into this country, jobs in every part of the UK, and a very clear message from business that they were prepared to invest now under this new Labour government. Part of that was £22 billion commitment to CCUS, creating the first
he just mentioned 22 billion. It was something else. It wasn't the black hole, but
parts of the country.
done the animation now, so I may as well
we'll support these investment. We will grow our economy and rebuild our country.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
New concepts of plans for
North
hospitals.
Cornwall is an amazing place to live and work, but a top-down approach from Westminster has failed us. Public services are chronically underfunded, young people forced to move away to pursue careers elsewhere, and affordable housing is a promise that's simply never kept. Will the Prime Minister meet with all 6 Cornish MPs to discuss devolution for Cornwall, with a Cornish Assembly that recognises our unique culture, language and national minority status, so we can finally unleash Cornwall's economic potential?
I'm grateful to member for raising this. I do believe in transferring power out of Westminster and into the hands of leaders who know their communities best. Those with skin in the game know what's best for their communities. We are already making steps in the South West by signing the devolution agreement for Devon and Torbay. Absolutely encourage local authorities to work with their neighbours to pursue deeper and wider devolution for their area, and I'll make sure that he has the meeting that he's asking for.
Final question, Blair McDougall.
As the Prime Minister works for a ceasefire and the return of the hostages, he'll have the support of people across this House. The Prime Minister will have noted the comments from the White House calling for urgent action to deal with the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and for the Netanyahu government to increase access to aid and to the amount of aid getting through. I wonder, does the Prime Minister agree with the comments from the White House and can he tell us what representations he is making on this matter?
Yes, I do agree with those remarks, and we are constantly making representations on this with our partners. There is an urgent need, and has been now for a very long time, for more aid to get into Gaza. It's a desperate situation, and Israel must comply with its international humanitarian law obligations, and that is why we are convening a session of the UK Security, of the UN Security Council with others to address this issue.
Right, that completes Prime Minister's question. I'll just let the front benches clear a bit.
Okay, well, let's let the front benches clear. So there we go. That was Prime Minister's questions. Quite, again, quite polite and subdued. Enjoy it while you can, because in a couple of weeks' time we're going to have either Kemi Badenoch, or if that's not bad enough, we will have Robert Jenrick as the leader of the opposition, and they're both Faragists in my view. They'll just stand up and say something obnoxious. They won't actually want to have their questions answered. They'll just want to make a point, and it will be about something daft. I'm so glad that the Taylor Swift ticket thing didn't come up. Rishi Sunak steered away from that because it's ridiculous. The furore is that Keir Starmer went to a gig, and the woman who was the singer at the gig, whose gigs had to be cancelled just a couple of days earlier in Austria because of a credible terrorist threat, she was given a police escort, and the Sun and that lot are all trying to make out that there's some kind of quid pro quo gone on here, where the Prime Minister calls up the Metropolitan Police and says, "Hello, it's the Prime Minister here. Taylor Swift's coming to town and I kind of like her, so give her police escort." And then he calls up Taylor Swift. He says, "Hey, Taylor, I got you the police escort you wanted. Can you give me a Guestie?" And the tabloids have made a big thing about this. There was a joke about it just before Prime Minister's questions started, but it wasn't actually in the PMQ session that I noticed. So that was good. But enjoy this while you can, while it lasts, because after the half-term break, the Tories are going to have a new leader, and yeah, it's not going to be like this anymore. It's not going to be as civil, and it's not going to be as productive. It was really refreshing to have the leader of the opposition stand up and say, "Are you going to do something about this?" And the Prime Minister standing up and going, "Yes." And even the bit where the leader of the opposition stood up and said a load of bollocks about China influencing our universities, and the Prime Minister stood up and said, "That's just bollocks," and then sat down again. It was brilliant. And more of this, please. This seems productive to me. I am not someone who enjoys listening to people drone on and on and on when there are decisions to be made. Make the freaking decision. It's a big problem in life that people are kind of scared of making decisions in case they make the wrong ones and look like a dick. I get that. I understand the worry, the stress that puts on people having to make decisions. But if you don't want to make decisions, don't go in for a job in Parliament, because that's a job where you have to make decisions every day. And if you mess up, you can lose your job. Unlike all other jobs where literally if you make a bad decision, you'll lose your job. Okay, so that's nothing new in the for the world of politics. Actually, I'm saying that, but there's a lot of MPs who make terrible, terrible, terrible decisions and keep their jobs. So, who knows? Wait, so that was Sunak's last PMQs? I don't think it is. I think we've got another week. And then I think there's going to be one next week, and then they convene. They have the half term, and I think that after half term recess, because it's school. It's just a public school. It just happens to have men in there and women, grown men and women doing the rules of school. They even have a little dinner bell for when you have to go for your dinner or to vote. But yes, I think I'll have to have a look at the parliamentary timetable. To be honest with you, I haven't looked at it. One angry pagan saying, "Yay, Starmer mentioned the deal for my area," which is quite exciting. I like the idea of having an assembly for Cornwall, and obviously Labour are committed to more and more devolution. We've already got these fantastic mayoral places, like Merseyside and Greater Manchester, and we've got a mayor for the North East now up in Durham and elsewhere. So yeah, it's good to have these local bodies that have power to make decisions for the local area, because we're not a homogeneous country. We never have been. We never will be. And not all areas need to be treated the same. And this Tory idea that one size fits all is just demonstrable bollocks, because what's good for London isn't necessarily what's good for Cornwall. And what's good for Cornwall isn't necessarily what's good for Liverpool. And so the more devolution we can have, the better. Moving towards a more federal system. It's not entirely out of the realms of possibility of Britain becoming a federal system, which I wouldn't mind so much. I do like the idea of having people who are close by to talk to about what's happening in your local area, rather than people who, spend half their time in London, which is a long way away and very expensive to get to. Will Sunak turn up next week or leave it to the deputy? I don't know. I assume he'll turn up next week. I honestly don't know. I don't want to say this is what's going to happen, because I haven't actually looked it up. Anthony Fisher says Lindsay Hoyle never even had to threaten someone with a cup of tea. That's very true. I didn't have to use my cup of tea animation. I haven't had to use that for a while, actually. One Angry Pagan says, "I'm Devonian, not Cornish. The deal Starmer mentions was the South Devon and Torbay, my constituency." Sorry, mate. Sorry. Oh, God, that's awful. Have I done that thing where someone hears my accent and then asks me if I'm from Manchester and I get really offended? Or if you're Canadian and they say, "Are you American?" Like, no, I'm Canadian. When you call a Kiwi an Aussie. Anyway, so yeah, all in all, quite a productive Prime Minister's question. It's quite subdued considering how many people are in the House. There wasn't the kind of insane jeering and nonsense. And, you know, I've got to say, there were a few good questions from Tory MPs. Tory MPs who I hate. But they were still making points about mental health. They were making points about special educational needs. Great. Good. Yes, thank you. Make points about that. Because that's like what we need to deal with in this country. Instead of this adversarial Punch and Judy show, which is what we've had for the last 14 years of a constant stream of prime ministers who, you know, they're in it for the pursuit of the debate. Darling, they're not in there to actually answer questions from their fellow parliamentarians. Lockyote77 says, no matter which of the two Muppets end up in opposition, I really hope Starmer handles them the same as he did today. Blah, blah, blah. Talks bollocks. Starmer stands up. That's not true. Sits down. No, that was really cool. I really did like that. And it allows more time for more questions, which is always good. PMQs will be way more petulant if Cammy wins. Yes, it will. Agree 1000%. More answers, more that's incorrect. Sits down. It was just great. It was just great. Anyway, so like I say, enjoy normal, because it doesn't always happen, especially in British politics. Enjoy this, you know, the serenity of things being relatively normal. The government had some good news today with inflation coming down. They got good news the other day with the summit that they had, the investment summit, which has got nearly double the amount that the Tories last got in their last summit. And yeah, Labour are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. There are things that I would prefer they were, you know, focusing on right now. But, you know, I think they're doing all right. Not brilliantly, not terribly. I think they're doing all right. Anyway, so I'm going to leave it at that. I'll be back at 6 o'clock tonight for a special edition of Geoscope. I know normally we do the intersection on Wednesdays, but we'll be doing that next week. So please join us for that. Me and Ollie Bowler-Hatman will be talking about all the crazy shit that's been going on around the world. And some of it's going to be interesting, some of it's going to be funny, some of it's going to be tragic. Yeah, we'll be discussing what's been going on. And yeah, if you'd like to join us for that, you are very welcome to do so. You're very welcome to jump into the chat with us. And until then, I'll say thank you so much for watching. Hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.